Okay, well, Andre, let's bring you up. Do you have a presentation
Okay.
you'd like to share?
Yeah. Yeah. I can
Okay,
start sharing it
we'll
now.
we'll get you loaded here, and we're grateful that you're able to join us here. You
And so my presentation is actually a follow-on from Don's, and it's about the whole issue of pesticide safety and how the pesticides in our food, damage our health and our children's health. So just, make sure it's behaving itself. So I want to start off with what the World Health Organization calls the global epidemic of non-communicable diseases. And these are diseases such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases, and diabetes. And they're the leading cause of death in the world. And it's actually an invisible epidemic that is the what they'll call the underappreciated cause of poverty and is hindering the economic development of many countries. And this burden is growing. More and more families are afflicted. And this is in all of our countries. You can't catch these diseases from other people. That's why we call it non-communicatable. You don't get cancer or stroke or heart disease or autism or immune diseases, Alzheimer's disease, hormone disruption, metabolic disease, ADHD, ADHD, bipolar, and so on by sitting next to people. It's caused by environment and lifestyle. And this means that we can prevent them by changing our habits, our food, etc., to avoid the environmental exposures that cause it. Pesticides and chemicals are strongly implicated in this epidemic. And so what I want to do is explain why, and explain why the so-called science that is put out to say that the pesticides that are used in farming are safe are mythology. And the first mythology is that all these poisons are rigorously tested. Most of the formulations that are sold on the market are used by farmers as pesticides. It's only one ingredient that is tested. These are formulations. The manufacturer just gets to deem one of them to be tested, and they don't test the whole formulation. What I want to say here that this is not scientific because it's a data-free assumption to assume there's no difference in toxicology if you just test this one ingredient they call the active ingredient and say that is the same as the whole formulation. They call the others inert, but they're not inert. They added a synergist adjuvant. A synergist is put in to make something more toxic. How can you say it's not more toxic when you add in something to make it more toxic? These sorts of word plays are completely unscientific. It's a fraud. And what I want to say here, that the limited testing of these formulated pesticide products that we do have, when we look at the whole formulation, rather than just this one ingredient, shows that in most cases they are hundreds of times more toxic than the ingredient. The other really big issue is that where they do test the whole formulation, they test it for what is called acute toxicity. That's the amount of poison it takes for you to die in 2 weeks. In this case, it's the test animals. Half the animals die in 2 weeks after exposure. 2 weeks does not give you enough time to tell, are you going to get cancer? Are you going to get nerve diseases? Are you going to get, are children going to get autism? You start looking at all the metabolic diseases they take longer than 2 weeks. 2 weeks. All it will tell you is if you'll drop dead, but nothing about the long-term effects. So in the US, there's 1,400 registered agricultural products, and not one, and I'll say, not one is any testing for children's health, reproductive effects, birth defects, cancer, developmental neurotoxicity, which I'll talk more about, the epigenetic mutations, hormone, immune, and metabolic system disruptions. The actual formulation that is used by farmers on our food are not tested for any of these. So you can't say they're safe. And I want to give you an example of the only long-term, credible, long-term, independent, peer-reviewed lifetime study of a formulated pesticide. This is Roundup. And what they did for the first time over the life of the animals is expose it to the actual levels that are in our food, in our environment, that all of us are exposed to, and we're told is safe. And what this researcher, Seralini, found is that there were mammary and other tumors. In fact, the only female rat that didn't have a mammary tumor died of an ovarian tumor. Or the male also ended up getting various types of tumors. On top of that, you can see the damage that is done to various organs, in this case, the liver and the kidney. What they did in this one, they tested a control. They tested Roundup. They also tested GMOs and Roundup. And what they found is also the GMOs and the combination of GMOs and Roundup alone caused damage to these organs. They're called lesions. Kidneys, for instance, these lesions don't heal. Kidneys don't repair. So what is happening to the average, in this case, the average, say, American person on the American diet, this is the type of cumulative damage that is being done at the rates of glyphosate that will be found in virtually everybody's bloodstream or urine from eating the normal diet. That's just one pesticide. But when the EPA, for instance, approves pesticides, it doesn't say, look, we're just going to approve one pesticide for all of farming. They approve multiple pesticides. They have insecticides to kill insects, herbicides to kill plants, fungicides to kill fungus, and every sort of side you can imagine. Side means to kill, nematicides, whatever. If there's anything that's living and you don't want it, there's a side for it. And it is expected that all of these chemicals are used in normal cropping cycles. Consequently, when you look at the testing of food, most foods have multiple residues. If you start testing fruit and veggies, you'll find apples, broccoli. They'll have multiple residues, not just one, because they're all used in the cropping cycle. And then we don't just eat one food, we eat multiple foods. So what we're getting are chemical cocktails. And there is absolutely no requirement to test for these chemicals, even though they're approved and they're allowed to be used. And we know that those residues are in our food. We know that these residues are in our blood and urine. Zero testing for their effects. They, pretend that there's no difference. However, what we know is where we have independent testing that many of these mixtures are synergistic. 1 and 1 equals 3 or more in effect. The really disturbing issue here is that we have research showing up to 232 chemicals found in placental cord blood in babies born in the USA. That's a crime, an absolute crime that we're doing this to our children. And at the same time, we have our regulatory authorities like the EPA saying, saying that there are no additive or synergistic effects from chemical compounds. That's not science, it's a data-free assumption. We do have the studies where we start looking at these cumulative effects of synergisms of 100%, 1,000% more toxicity. They go from supposedly being non-toxic to highly toxic. The other most concerning one for me is that they ignore the special requirements for the fetus, the newborn, and growing children in relation to what's called developmental neurotoxicity and other diseases. There are no pesticide testing by any regulatory authority on our planet for children. And yet we have peer-reviewed science showing that these groups, the unborn, the newborn, and children going through puberty, are the most vulnerable. And I will talk further about that in this presentation. The myth I hear all the time is, yes, there's chemicals in our food. This is when they, when the Department of Agriculture and other people put out their surveys on pesticide residues, and they go, yes, but it's all below the MRL, it's all safe. It's too low. Well, they have no science to show that it's safe, because what we know is that the smallest amount can be more toxic than larger amounts. And we have hundreds and hundreds of studies showing that some chemicals, when you get down to parts per billion and trillion, they become more toxic than parts per million, because they start actually working like hormones and they disrupt our hormone system. And to give you an idea of how small it is, a part per trillion, if I was to put one drop of a pesticide in 3 Olympic swimming pools of water, that's a part per trillion. And we know of at least 600 pesticides that are active at that level. We've hundreds of studies showing that they become endocrine or hormone disruptors at these low levels, and not one, what they call the acceptable daily limit, has been tested at these levels. In other words, zero science. It's all based on assumptions, no evidence-based science. This is to give you an idea. This is the way they pretend that a pesticide works. A high level, high dose, high level, high toxicity. As you get a lower dose, the toxicity goes down. And that's a 400-year-old basis of toxicology. Most sciences in the last 400 years have progressed quite considerably. Our standard toxicology is still stuck in an era that predates steam age in technology and science. What we know now is, in the real world, we have what we call non-monotonic doses. Yes, it can go down in toxicity, but as the dose goes lower, it can go up in toxicity. Like I said, there's around over 600 pesticides we know that work this way. The lower the dose, the worse they are. Then the critical thing here is they start to work like hormones. And one of the hormones that they imitate is estrogen. And as a result, these chemicals are strongly implicated in the epidemic, and I don't even use the word pandemic, of cancers and other diseases of our sexual tissue. So, all of us know people who are affected by breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, endometrial and cancer, and also endometriosis, prostate. Basically, nearly every man, if they live long enough, will die either of or with prostate cancer and then testicular cancers. The reproductive problems, endometriosis, ovarian insufficiencies, falling sperm counts, abnormal sperm counts, young boys being born with genital deformations and undescended testes. And we actually know this can actually come from our grandparents' exposure. The thing is, all of us, the egg we came from was formed in our mother when she was in our grandmother, and she was a fetus in our grandmother. That's when she formed those eggs. So our grandmother's exposure can affect us. And we're actually starting to understand now this plays a really major role in these sorts of diseases. And also, we're also seeing cancers now as a result of these small exposures. The fact is, and we also know men's exposure too can cause these sorts of problems that we pass on to our children and grandchildren. Then we have the breakdown myth. Modern pesticides rapidly biodegrade. You know, they're not like the bad old ones like DDT. Well, if they rapidly biodegraded and didn't leave residues like we're told, why does every pesticide have a maximum residue level? Well, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out if you have a maximum residue level, it's because it leaves a residue. They all leave residues. So then they'll go, oh, look, they break down very quickly. What they don't tell you is they don't break down to nothing. They break down to metabolites, and these metabolites tend to be more toxic and tend to be more residual. The best way to say is our car will break down to rust. It doesn't break down to nothing. Rust never sleeps. It's stable. It lasts a long time. And that's the same sort of process of oxidization with pesticides. We know where we test these breakdown products. In many cases, they're hundreds of percent more toxic. So as time goes by, yes, the main pesticide's broken down. However, now you've got a more residual and more toxic metabolite breakdown product. In other words, the food that you have, that you've kept it for 2 weeks, thinking pesticides will break down, now it's more dangerous. And then the most serious one for me is the regulatory authorities, the ones who are supposed to be protecting us with the science. And they ignore the gold standard in science, which is a large body of peer-reviewed papers in independent journals. They just ignore it. What they do is they use the unpublished studies that they call commercial in confidence from the actual pesticide companies' data. The big issue for us is they won't let us see these studies. They go, oh, it's commercial in confidence. You can't see it. It's not commercial in confidence, and we have every right to know if you're putting poison in our food, what is the science that you're using to say that these residues are safe? You can't hide it from us. When we do get it, it's through freedom of information or a leak to us. We normally find that the chemicals are far worse. Actually, find most of these studies are not good enough to be published in a scientific journal, and we can actually see that they're hiding the science as to how dangerous these chemicals are. The other one is the revolving door. We get managers from pesticide companies being appointed to manage whole committees and departments within the EPA and other pesticide groups. They make the decisions on approving their company's products. Then the other thing they do is a lot of the managers of these departments end up getting very good jobs as vice president of this and vice president of that, in these pesticide companies. So it's a corrupt bribery system. Most of the committees that make the decision are hidden, where we get access to who they are. Sitting on it, we actually find nearly all of them receive some sort of money, some sort of income from pesticide companies. So this is corruption. It's what we call regulatory capture. It's where the regulator has been captured by the industry and does the industry bidding rather than looking after the public. So I just want to go through this last bit, which to me is the most important. Our children are our future and we're poisoning them. And as I said before, the special requirement for the fetus, the newborn, growing children, in relationship to developmental neurotoxicity. This is where the pesticides are nerve poisons and they damage the development of nerves and other diseases. That is not subject to any regulatory process. It's ignored. What is very important is that the fetus, the newborn and growing children do not have protective liver enzymes as adults. They do all the research on adult animals. They have protective liver enzymes. So do we. We can tend to break it down, but children have none. And so they cannot break down the smallest amount of these pesticides. And the peer-reviewed testing shows that they are vulnerable to the smallest amount. And what we find in the literature is what it's causing is neurotoxicity. Fluoride is an example one in water. There's the court case that the EPA just lost over it, showing how it lowers IQ. So the pesticide residues in food, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, autism spectrum, organ damage. I showed you kidney, liver, lungs, autoimmune diseases like asthma, lack of physical coordination, loss of temper, anger management, bipolar, schizophrenia spectrum, depression, child use, suicide. And we also know childhood obesity because, as I said, these chemicals at low doses work as hormone disruptors. They are disrupting the normal metabolism of these children. And this is an example. This is a peer-reviewed paper. I'm one of the co-authors. You've probably seen a lot of people use this one. Nancy Swanson, myself, co-authors did this. We looked at over 20 diseases in the US and their relationship with the increase in glyphosate. And the increase in glyphosate started in the 1990s with the introduction of GMO crops. And here, what we showed is that the increase in autism tracks perfectly. What we did, because there's a saying in science that correlation does not mean causation, but you can look at the probability that one causes the other. And we use a statistical formulation called Pearson's correlation coefficient. I don't expect you to repeat that. But essentially, what that number means, if this is an accident, it's a 1 in 10,000 chance. So the odds of one causing the other is 1 in 10,000. That's a really strong probability. This was a medication that had that sort of probability. It would be taken off the market. Fortunately, it's only a pesticide. It's only a poison, so we don't need to do that. So we were told, we were ignored saying, oh, look, it's only, correlation isn't causation. Well, here, not long afterwards, here's causation. When we talk about, I talk about damaging the developmental nervous system. Our biggest collection of nerves, that's our brain. And this is an example of what glyphosate does. So this is the control, no glyphosate. This is a nerve cell. And what you're seeing here when you put glyphosate, it is not developing properly. So here you actually see, the dendrite. This is what makes the connections to other nerve cells. Think about the brain. And you look at each division. Here it's developing, it's making lots and lots of connections that will connect to other nerve cells. Here, it's not developing properly. And then look at the fourth division. We've got lots and lots of connections. Each of those will connect to another nerve cell. That's how our brains work, neural networks. But here, the nerves are underdeveloped. So the brains of these children are not making the connections like they should. And this is why it's causing autism. One of the causes. Can I say that when we talk about neurotoxicity, there's a lot of things. Fluoride does the same, for instance. We know mercury does the same, what we call neurotoxins. There's a lot of them. But glyphosate is a neurotoxin on this basis alone because it's pernicious. It's everywhere in all our food supplies. It's like DDT. It just moves everywhere. On this alone, it should be banned. The other issue, I just want to say, probably one of the best reports on cancer to come out was the US President's Cancer Panel, and it was over 30 of the world's best experts. And what they wanted to say is that 80% of cancers are caused by environmental toxins, not genes. Environmental toxins, especially chemicals and pesticides. And for instance, if you want to look at children, leukemia rates are consistently elevated amongst children who grow up in farms because of it. We can actually see the rate of children's cancers are increasing. This is still old, the latest show that we still see this trend. It's actually going up like the autism trend. But also cancers generally, a whole range of them are going up. This, in this case, thyroid cancer. We're looking, in this case, in adults. And it's the same again. We tracked it against the yellow bars, the increases in cancer. The red is increase in glyphosate. The blue is the increase in GMO crops. Well, essentially, the amount of glyphosate that's being used is because of the increase in GMO crops. What I want to show you here, the green line is what we call the trend line. And it was going up and down, just trending fairly equally until you see in the 1990s what happens as glyphosate goes up, so does thyroid cancer. And once again, it's a 1 in 10,000 chance possibility that these are not related. In other words, very, very strongly related how glyphosate, this is one of the cancers it causes. Of course, we were criticized about it when we put that out, but it wasn't that much later that the International Agency for Research on Cancer declared glyphosate. They gave it the second highest rating for cancer, 2A. What that means, it's definitely sufficient evidence that it causes cancer in animals. They gave it, instead of giving it the highest category, a lot of the researchers wanted to give it the highest, but they downgraded it to the second highest, saying there's only limited evidence in humans. Of course, the main one, of course, is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But as if you're listening to Don, there's 30 other diseases, other cancers. We've got very strong evidence. So I just wanted to show you, in terms of the evidence of how these pesticides are causing massive problems, particularly to our children. The most important one are the nerve poisons, things like organophosphates. In fact, most of the pesticides are nerve poisons. And, what they've found is that all of these damage the developing brain. Like I showed you how glyphosate damages the nerves. And that's because the brain is our largest collection of nerve cells. And this is one showing that the smallest amount of chlorpyrifos and other organophosphates like diazinon damage neural cells, nerve cell replication. In other words, they stop nerves from developing properly, like you saw with glyphosate. And this is an example. This is in Mexico and Sonora. It's two communities. One lives in the valley where pesticides are used. The other, Yaqui community, lives up in the hills where there's no pesticides. These are 4-year-old girls being asked to draw pictures of people. And you look at these and you go, this is exactly what 4-year-old kids would draw, It's just lovely. You look at this and it breaks your heart. This is brain damage. At 4 years old, they cannot draw, a simple little picture. You've got, this is peer-reviewed science, but it gets dismissed again. They go, oh, that's anecdotal. That's not real science. Well, since then, so-called real science, peer-reviewed studies have shown that the smallest amounts cause damage. I've just put in some of them here. They all came up with similar results, that fetal exposure to our unborn. And how do we get exposed to our unborn? By eating the average diet. That's what that means. The pesticides in it will reduce the IQ of children. In other words, when mum eats the American diet. One of those studies, they tried to find the lowest amount of residues that was safe, and they couldn't. They couldn't find a lower limit. I won't read all that through. That's basically their scientific conclusions. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Now we've had much better techniques for analyzing things like brain damage and using things like MRI. And they could actually find the areas of damage caused to these children's brains because of the diet that their mother had. And this is while while they're a fetus, they're unborn, but they're already being exposed and suffering brain damage. So I want to end on this, because at the same time we have the science showing that in a very, very short time, organic diet intervention significantly reduces urinary pesticide levels in US children and adults. And I get people saying to me, oh, organic's so expensive. How expensive is this? This is a crime against our children. How expensive is this that children are being born with lower IQ, brain damage, because they're eating what they think is a normal diet? This is the best value in the world. And I just want to say, particularly for the younger people here, you're going to have kids, give them the best start in life and eat organic. That is the best way you can assure that your children, the future of our species, has a good future. This is the cheapest, the best value that you can do, and the best you can do for yourself and your family. And I'll just end on this to say, if you want to learn more about it, I have published 2 books um, available through my publisher, Acres USA. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you joining the lineup of speakers here today. And boy, is there any question that regenerative agriculture is the answer? Is anybody still thinking that, I wonder if this is really the right thing to do? Maybe we're still figuring out how do we make this profitable? How do we apply it on our place? There's still going to be lots of questions, but André, thank you so much for joining us. As you practice what you preach and you farm and you grow food, maybe I'll boil it down to this. We all know that the food system's broken and we are exposed to toxins and to pesticides. We can grow the best food in the world, but we still live in a community where maybe our neighbors spray or it's drift from miles away. So what do you recommend for somebody to be able to be on a maintenance type detox, and how often do you do it? What's a good detox for us as humans, like Don Huber talked about for the soil?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. Can I say there's no easy answer? For me, I'm the one organic farmer surrounded by, industrial sugarcane farmers and even the beef people spray. And I'm a chronic asthmatic. That drift affects me. I just think we have to, I suppose, in the end of the day, live in the real world. So where I can, I always try to get organic food. I live in a remote area. I can't always do it. Grow so much of it myself, and so you just try your best. Other things that we know that do detox in terms of supplements. High doses of vitamin C are very good, and there's good science on that. That's cheap. Another really good supplement is N-acetylcysteine, NAC, and that is very good for detoxing, particularly your liver. The liver is the organ that does all the heavy lifting. That makes the enzymes to detox. So our body, if we're trying to look after ourselves, can detox a lot of it. So the question is, and what? Okay, it's called N-acetylcysteine. I'll email it to Jared. I can email it to you guys, and it'd be easier that way. It's a really common over-the-counter supplement. I get it from iHerb, cheap as, but look it up. It is wonderful for helping your body break down. And another really good one again for alpha lipoic acid does the same again, and it also helps. Alpha lipoic acid also rejuvenates vitamin C and vitamin E as well, and very good at detoxing. N-acetylcysteine also is a key component of making glutathione, which is our body's main antioxidant. So that and glutathione is the one that will essentially neutralize the breakdown products of these toxins. So that there are fairly simple, low-cost, non-toxic ways that we can do to help our bodies recover from these toxins, because it's really hard now wherever you live to avoid them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is. Do the best we can. And yeah, appreciate everyone's comments in the chat. Again, show some gratitude, appreciation, and love to André for being here with us. We are grateful that you've joined this lineup. Yeah, Air clap, virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
We are very, very grateful that you've been able to join us here.